Welcome to episode 214 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today, we're going to be discussing the state of the market in North America, finding out about one of my favourite ski areas, La Grove, and getting an update on this autumn's London Snow Show. Now, my name's Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guest today. I'm delighted to welcome freelance journalist Sam Haddad back for her, and I looked it up, third appearance on the show. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Hi, Iain. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I see you on the screen right now. I know in real life you're actually quite close to me because you're in Brighton.
Yeah, sunny Brighton. Well, it is actually sunny today. It hasn't been that sunny, has it, this year yet? But yeah, no, it's nice today.
Excellent. Well, great to have you back on the show, Sam. And joining us for the first time, I'm delighted to welcome Nick Sergant, who is president of the SIA. That stands for Snowsports Industries of America. Hi, Nick. How are you going?
Good morning. I'm doing great. It's morning here, evening, afternoon for you guys. And we're just getting into our day here. But it's delightful to be on the podcast, and thanks for including me.
Excellent. And just remind us, Nick, where you are right now.
Our offices are in Park City, Utah. So this is the home of SIA, and we're right in the heart of the Wasatch Mountains. And right in front of my office, maybe you could see it, maybe you can't in the reflection. We've got Park City Mountain Resort, you've got Deer Valley, you've got the canyons, and then just on the other side, you've got Brighton Solitude, Alta Snowbird. So we're right in the heart of where we want to be as we're trying to solve winter sport problems.
Well, what a wonderful location to be. I went to Salt Lake City a couple of years ago, but it was in the summer and then moved on to Idaho. Utah is definitely on my list. That kind of ideally road trip where you'd go to Utah, Big Sky, Sun Valley, perhaps all in the same thing. It remains on my list. Hopefully we'll do that one day. Now, a question I always like to ask my guests to start off with is, when did you ski or snowboard last? Sam, when was that for you?
It was actually La Grove, which I know we're going to talk about later, in February half term. So I could probably mention the one before that, which was Chamonix at New Year, where I had a bluebird powder day, and it was one of my favourite days in about 5 years with my kids. It was great.
That's excellent. So you went to two of my favourite places, Chamonix and La Grove, last season. What about yourself, Nick? When were you last on snow?
I was last on snow in Chamonix in April, myself, and we were there in Passy for some meetings, and then we went to Chamonix for a few days, and absolutely gorgeous as always. And but before that, I was in Sundance, Utah, which is a nice small resort, and we had, maybe a half a meter of snow. And this was in beginning of April. And so it was a proper Utah powder day. And nobody was there. So we got to enjoy the spoils.
That is great. And that's certainly one of the things that Utah advertises. Is it, I'm trying to think of the strapline now. Is it like the greatest snow on earth or something like that?
That's right. And it's on all the driver's license, on your licenses on your cars. Greatest snow on earth. And
yeah.
Anyway, I would have to say it's darn close. I've been a lot of different places around the world, and Utah holds its own. And certainly this winter and this last winter, we had 2 great years of plenty of snow, lots of powder, and just why you would want to come here. And so those winters really were memorable in that regard.
Cool. Well, like I say, it's on my bucket list. My last skiing was in Les Alpes, and coincidentally enough, it looks like my next skiing is going to be in Les Alpes as well, because I'm going to be there in about 3 weeks' time, and it's just the last weekend of their summer glacier skiing being open. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be there, I'm there to write an article about what you can do in summer in ski resorts. I thought I would try and get some skiing in. As regular listeners to the show will know, the catch about skiing in summer is you have to start early because it closes by 12:30. So fingers crossed that there's good snow there. Right, we have a few news items that I'd like to cover just before we move on. I noticed that Marcel Hirscher has declared that he is going to come back to racing and compete for the Netherlands. Marcel Hirscher is a 2-time Olympic champion. He's been retired for 5 years, but his mother's home country is the Netherlands. And he is only 35, which makes him younger than Dave Riding, Great Britain's Dave Riding, who's been extremely successful. He's got I think 3 Olympic medals in total, 5 world titles. So that will be fascinating. I think Austria said they were a little disappointed that he came back and he's not going to race for them. And I'm almost certain the Netherlands have never been on the podium. So that should be really interesting to see what happens there. Also, last week, I was at an event called LISTEX Luxury. That took place in London. And I spoke to organizer Babsy Lapwood about it, just to listener, so you can find out, what was going on there. I'm here right now with Babsy Lapwood, who is the organizer of LISTEX Luxury. We're currently sitting on a boat. We're on our way past Butler's Wharf. Fantastic views. I wonder if you'd like to just explain to us what's been going on today.
Great to have you in. Thanks very much as always. Yes, today is our 3rd year of LISTEX Luxury. We've grown probably 3 times the size.
I noticed it's grown quite a lot. There's a new venue this year in County Hall, and that was just to fit everybody in who wants to attend, right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And who are the sort of people who are coming to LISTEX Luxury then?
They are, we've got luxury alpine suppliers coming to meet with UK trade and press, mainly focused on the luxury ski market.
Actually, James from the Ski Club of Great Britain gave a presentation earlier, but how do we define what luxury is in terms of ski then?
It's very tricky when you do the research, because luxury is different for everyone, but when we do the research we have to look at the spend per person.
Right, okay, and am I right in saying that we're seeing those numbers going up within the industry?
Yeah, going up massively. And also people who book 3-star hotels, they're more booking 4-star hotels. That's not necessarily the luxury market, but now obviously the 5 and 6-star hotels.
Well, the fact that it's moved to a bigger venue again for the kind of 3rd year in a row now really indicates the strength of interest, certainly within the UK in terms of luxury market. So thanks very much for putting on this event. We know we've got a beautiful some food being served upstairs right now, and the drinks are being served courtesy of the Snow Show. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Iain.
There were some interesting stats released at LISTEX Luxury by James Gambrell from the Ski Club of Great Britain. They actually defined luxury ski trips as being trips that are £4,000 or more per person. So looking at that, it represents 4% of the market by passengers. So makes sense. Not many people are shelling out £4,000 per person on a ski holiday. But in terms of the number of trips, it goes up to 21%. Because the people with lots of money are taking quite a lot of trips. And in terms of value, that is 50% of the market by value. And I put a link in the show notes to that, so you can find out a little bit more. And on the list of places, bucket list places for people in luxury travel, Japan came top, but Canada and the States were just after that. On the subject of shows, I noticed there's a new Northern Snow Show, which is organised by Chill Factore, the indoor snow slope in Manchester. I spoke to their managing director, Iain Brown at LISTEX. He was very positive about the response so far. And as far as I can see, having a show in London and one in Manchester has got to be good. A rising tide floats all boats. So I'm hoping to record a short interview in time for our next episode. Talking about shows, this isn't specifically why I wanted to invite you, Nick, onto the show. But I believe, SIA are going to have a presence at the London Snow Show. But I wondered if I could just take you back a little bit and find out a little bit more about SIA, Snowsports Industries of America, because I believe once upon a time, it was an organization of putting on a show itself.
That's right. For over 50 years, we had the largest winter sports show in the world called Snow Show. And that was in Las Vegas. Actually started in Chicago and then moved to New York and then ended up in Las Vegas, and really created and defined the trade show industry. It was the first trade show in Las Vegas, and that grew Las Vegas as the hub of trade shows during its day. But like everything, when I got my hands firmly gripped on the steering wheel to run this organization, I noticed the decline in participation, in revenue, square footage or square meter, however you want to look at it. And we were starting to experience a change within the winter sport business. and then, the demand for consumers to be outside was increasing. And so I sold the show to Outdoor Retailer, which was the premier outdoor show here in North America. And we had the first ever outdoor retailer snow show in January of 2018, which was the largest winter sport outdoor show on the planet, with over 800,000 square feet of brands and attendees. And that was in Denver, Colorado. And then unfortunately, COVID hit.
It's interesting to hear about the size of that show. Mm-hmm. When you see the London show, it is a different issue, but the UK market is smaller than the US market. It's not really a surprise in that respect. You mentioned that I think you joined SIA in 2015, but you have a background yourself as a racer earlier on, and I read somewhere that you moved on to become a boot fitter, and maybe you worked on Alberto Tomba's ski boots.
Oh, you've done your research. That was I worked on a lot of different athletes' boots, Alberto Tomba being one of them. But yeah, no, I started in this industry doing World Cup service for Dina Lang in the 90s, and lived and worked in Europe, and was primarily on the women's World Cup downhill tour, tuning skis. But like everything, you had to be a very accomplished boot fitter, and you had to know how the bindings worked as well. So when you went to a big event like World Championships or the Olympics, you were master of all trades. And so I did a lot of boot fitting, and I did do some work with Alberto Tomba in Sestriere in Italy for the '97 World Championships.
So you're working for the brands, and if an athlete was sponsored by you, then you were helping to make sure that their kit was in peak condition.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. And then after that, you moved on to work for Burton.
I did a quick stop with Salomon and Adidas for about 5 years, and then doing sports marketing and partnerships. And then that led me to working at Burton Snowboards for 12 or 13 years, doing global partnerships, partner marketing, licensing, events and entertainment.
Right. So clearly, that background within the industry has covered all sorts of different touch points. So bringing you into Snowsports Industries America, then, like, who are the members of that? What are the activities of SIA now?
Yeah. So I'll just give you a little quick background of SIA. SIA was a trade show, and now it's a trade association. Our mission is to help the winter's outdoor community thrive. So as the trade association for the winter outdoor industry, SIA's memberships and members, which are all the brands that you can think of, Rossignol, Salomon, Burton, Spyder, Descent, Bogner, all of these brands, and there's 550 brands that you can think of. They are our members, including research for retailers, including other non-for-profits that we're solving immediate business problems for. And we are constantly adapting to the change and pressures that the industry is experiencing. And so we are out here trying to spot trends, facilitate industry-wide strategy and innovation to ensure that the winter outdoor industry thrives. And so, again, I mentioned SIA is not a new organization. We've been around for over 80 years. I'm the third leader of this association, and we've adjusted our business platform, as mentioned earlier, from trade shows to industry issues.
So part of what you're doing there is you're helping develop a roadmap for all of those brands for the sports future. I know you do a lot of research, consumer research, which some of which I've seen look very, very interesting. I actually saw some data earlier today from the NSAA, which suggests that this year the number of skier visits in the States went down slightly, but in fact the year before was exceptionally high. So it's still a very strong, I think it was the third highest visitation in the last 10 years, perhaps. So the number of visitors, in the States, people going skiing on a regular basis is pretty strong right now.
That's right. It's very strong. And we've had a 7% dip in participation at resort this winter, primarily due to lack of snow on the East Coast and the West Coast. And there certainly was plenty of snow in the Rockies and in the Intermountain, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, which helped save the business. But to be very fair, the East Coast saw a strong winter come towards the end of the winter in March and April, which helped save the numbers. And then the same on the West Coast in the Pacific Northwest. They saw a lot of late season storms as well. But yeah, certainly we were down from last year where we saw a lot of snowfall in every region in the U.S. earlier. And then, lastly, multi-mountain passes have really helped and enhanced skier visits and given that consumer the ability to ski or visit their home resort more frequently or visit other resorts that they may have on their bucket list more frequently.
That is very interesting. I would definitely like to come on to those multi-resort passes in due course. Just to put it into context, what we're talking about is 60 million skier visits during the season. To compare that with the most recent research from the Ski Club of Great Britain, in the UK, we're talking around 2 million skiers, those active skiers. The actual skier visits might be slightly higher. Now, in the States, the model is slightly different. People are more likely to go for shorter trips, for day trips, etc. But giving you a scale of the market, we're talking about something that's around 30 times as large in the States as in the UK. Very, very different situation. But some of the challenges that are being faced are very similar. And I think your research has also shown that there, to a certain degree, the American market is suffering from what we're experiencing in the UK and all across Europe, which is a maturing of the market. That the average age is getting older, and there aren't so many people coming in. Have you seen that? And I wondered as well, just to throw into that question, how are you looking at bringing newcomers into the sport?
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's a common problem within this industry in general. And certainly, we look at all the demographics and we study the demographics and we come up with different trends and insights. And then we have data to support the thoughts and what we're seeing. But certainly the baby boomers, which was the largest demographic of winter sport participants, they are slowly aging out of this sport and they are moving on to retirement in warmer weather climates and maybe picking up, pickleball, golf, tennis, and moving away from the cold specifically and winter sport. And so we're certainly seeing that trend. And when you look at the younger demographics, and these are, Gen Z and Y, there are certainly other factors that come into play with other sports that take up more time, whether it be soccer, whether it be baseball, whether lacrosse here in the U.S., to be on a traveling team consumes all your time. So you're stepping away from other sports that might be of interest to you. And so we're seeing that, smaller demographics within these different groups. So we have to work really hard to get people back into winter sport, spending more time, going more frequently. And there's a lot of programs that we can talk about. I think we're going to talk about shortly.
Well, actually, one of them I read about is a program or initiative called Share Winter, which is specifically trying to address that. That's
right. Share Winter is a fabulous program here in the U.S. And it's driven by a really unique person, Constance Beverly, but she is involved with a number of other learn to ride or learn to ski programs. And so she consolidates financial interest here in the U.S. and then shares that money to help these other programs thrive. And, they have over 40,000 skier visits within their program, and it's growing almost 10% year over year. And she's making a real difference in getting people on snow, not just white American people, but people of color, people of of interesting backgrounds and certainly of lesser means.
And so just to be specific, so the Share Winter program is bringing school children into skiing and snowboarding.
That's right. It's school children. I don't recall the minimum age, but I think it's maybe somewhere in the fourth or fifth grade. I don't know how old you are in fourth or fifth grade. I guess I should know. Yeah, when you're in grade school, you have the opportunity to apply to these programs that Share Winter puts on, and certainly there are other programs like SOS as well. Share Winter and SOS work together in helping bring kids to the mountains.
Cool. I wish we had more of an initiative like that here in the UK. I recently interviewed, listeners might have heard my interview with Stu Brass, who was talking about when he organised the AIM series, which was a series of events, indoor snow domes around the UK. They used to go into schools as part of the promotion for that and offer people free lessons. And I wish there was more of that going on right now. But let's move on to another topic, which is certainly the same wherever you are in the world. And you've already indicated that it has affected the States with the changes in snowfall, a shorter season. I think one of the reasons this year the numbers were down in the States was there literally were fewer skier days across the whole season. Mm-hmm. Is SIA doing anything in terms of action around climate change?
We do a lot around climate change, and that certainly is the number one threat to our industry here in North America and the United States. As a single season sport that depends 100% on snow, we're very challenged. So we have a climate platform for our members where, we are working towards reducing our carbon emissions, getting our members interested in being more sustainable and doing their part to participate in efforts to counter climate change. So our platform is called Climate United. We have over 70 winter sport members that are part of our pact. We are also working with government in Washington on different sustainable programs. And we're working with other groups, not just here in the US, but in Europe as well, through the Winter Sport Network, which is a consortium of over 70 members, your favorite winter sport hard good brands, skis and snowboards, to come up with sustainable solutions for the materials that are used within the product, the manufacturing, sustainable manufacturing, and looking at how can you create circularity around these products, around the life of the product, refurbishing the product, and then ultimately recycling that product.
Yeah, I mean, that is so interesting, the developments in that area. And any listeners who listen to the equipment episodes I did with Al Morgan last winter will be aware of so many of the innovations that are going on in relation to sustainability now. And, I'm really interested in this topic because what you're talking about, that circular economy, is there's so much action in that area, and I'm hoping to put on a panel at one of the events I'm organising in September, specifically in relation to that. In fact, I've written up the provisional title on my board, which I'm going to read out now. It's called "Beyond Greenwashing: Why Today's Kit is Being Made to Last." That's going to be the concept, because so many of the brands now are really focusing on making sure that there's that durability element of it and replacement and repair, etc.
There's a ton of regulations, standards, and compliance that's happening right now in the EU. It's also happening here in the US, and so we're a part of that change, and we're working with brands like Rossignol and Atomic and Solomon and Burton and Capita to really help them achieve their goals before the EU tells you what you will have to do. And so we're ahead of this, which is great. But we're only as good as our slowest member. We're in a lot of conversations, and we're creating a lot of working groups, and ultimately creating product.
Well, it is great to see how those standards are changing. There's one more area I'd like to cover if we could, and you kind of referred to that earlier when you touched on the multi-resort passes. Now, a little while ago, I interviewed Mike Goar. I can't remember what episode number it was, but I'll put a link in the show notes. And he is head of Vail Resorts over in Europe now. He's been based in Andermatt, has been through the changes going on in Andermatt. Crans-Montana went through early this year. So Vail Resorts owning 2 resorts in Europe. Probably when you were in Chamonix, both Sam and yourself, and certainly when I was in Zermatt, see many more Americans taking advantage of the Ikon pass and the opportunity to ski over there. And if you're coming from the States, somewhere like Zermatt, we perceive it to be quite expensive. But in fact, the dollar, gets you quite a lot. So those passes are affecting us more in Europe now. But in the States, they're becoming increasingly important as well. I think I'm right in saying that more than 50% of skier visitations came from multi-passes.
Yeah, that's about it. That's about right. Yeah, the passes are really amazing, and we've been when I say we, I say probably more Vail and Alterra, less SIA, but we've been supportive of the multi-mountain passes for a number of reasons. One is it lowers the cost to get into winter sports if you are a high user. It certainly isn't very accessible to a newcomer to the sport, meaning they're unaware of these multi-mountain passes, or if they are aware, the price might be a little too much for them. I think they start, if you buy early, they're at $500 for a limited pass. And then if you want the full all access pass, it's $900. And, that may seem like a lot of money for someone who's just getting into the sport or trying the sport, but certainly those that are participating, more than 5, 7, 10 days, it is really an affordable way to have access to. There's over 70 plus resorts included if you have both Ikon and Epic.
Yeah, and I find that strategy that Vail Resorts are developing really interesting because you mentioned that for a newcomer, to shell out that amount of money, you're probably not going to do it. But within their portfolio of resorts, they have a lot of these, I don't know, mom and pop resorts or feeder resorts, which are just like one lift kind of places that they've bought up because they can see that if someone's going to start skiing or snowboarding and start to enjoy it, they're going to want to go somewhere bigger in due course, and they want them to ensure that they end up going to one of the Vail Resorts portfolio.
They do, and those feeder resorts are close proximity to major metropolitan areas as well. So when you think about strategy, they've done an amazing job of acquiring resorts that are close to these major cities. But with the goal of getting that skier or that snowboarder to come to one of their larger resorts, and certainly, with the ultimate goal of having one of your heavy users potentially going to Crans-Montana, Andermatt, Zermatt, Chamonix, even Hokkaido to Niseko, and going in the other direction to Asia, which I've done a number of times. And, it's a very seamless, easy transition if you have one of these passes.
There's certainly a degree of negativity towards them, but it's very easy to understand the benefits of them. And, listeners, if you listen to previous episodes, we've covered, all aspects of that, but I'm very welcome to have feedback. So that's super interesting, Nick. I believe you're coming over for the London Snow Show, so hopefully we will get to meet in person.
That'd be
Excellent.
Awesome.
So I look forward to that. If it's all right with you, I'm going to move on to Sam now. Sam, great to have you back on the show. You've been on the show before. We previously have discussed climate change. I know it's a topic that's very important to you, that you write about a lot. I think it was episode 179. And in fact, you have your own Substack blog, the name of which is Climate and Board Sports. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what, do you want to just give us the listener an idea of what type of interviews or what you're covering on that blog?
Yeah, I started it just to sort of try and make sense of what I was noticing with my own eyes, having lived in Chamonix in 2000, 2001, did my winter seasons there, and watching the glaciers kind of recede each time I go. And so, yeah, it was a site where I interview snowboarders and also skiers, mountaineers, surfers in the summer, just about their experience. Try and include some positive action, like initiatives that people are doing that might be useful for the readers as well. But also, I just wanted to kind of drill into how people are feeling about everything, what they're noticing, their experience. Basically, did quite an interesting interview recently that I haven't posted yet with the NoJO in France. Have you heard about those guys? NoJO, so they don't want the Olympics to come back to the Alps in France. So they're part of a movement that is, I think they're trying to kind of have interesting discussions about it. When you look at their website, they're kind of saying, look, if you agree with us or don't agree, please come and let's just talk about this. I think they're kind of anti the idea that these things are happening at a local government or government level without local people being consulted.
Interesting. I mean, this is kind of off topic from what we were going to talk about, but I have written recently about that. We were talking about the 2030 Winter Olympics, I believe, which is due to be ratified in about a month's time, because I believe it's all gone through apart from the literal signing of the document. And those games would be hosted across several different regions. So some of the activity would take place down in Nice, the ice skating, etc. But the alpine events, that we would understand them, would be spread around the Tarentaise, but some over in Serre Chevalier, Montgenèvre, etc. And I'm just interested if these things are going to go ahead in existing venues. I think maybe in Nice they need to build something new. So what is the objection? Isn't that relatively sustainable?
I think the objection is water use, and I think just kind of lack of consultation. I think people, it's clear that, knowing how recent winters have been, that we're going to need a lot of artificial snow, and I think people are worried really about where that water is coming from, and I think that's worry from season to season anyway. We saw the protests at La Clusaz about that. I think people just want a discussion, and it was interesting that, was it Sweden that pulled out? Vancouver pulled out. So I think a lot of French people are frustrated they haven't had the chance to kind of vote against this, as they feel like other people have been given a kind of proper referendum on.
Okay, it is interesting, because certainly one of the rationales that the IOC are using, as I understand it, is to select climate secure venues where there aren't going to be some of the risks. I probably don't want to step down that route, but the use of water, I mean, there's a lot of ski bashing, as it's been described. When I was out in Ladies Out talking to them about the new Jandri lift, they said to me, oh, we're building a lift that's going to last for 30 years. They'll, guarantee skiing for 30 years. I thought, what? 30 years? That's not very long. Is that really what you're looking at? But that's what their discussion in France is very much about. Should these investments be going on in a dying sport? So I totally get that. And what I'll do is I'll look it up and put a link into the notes. However, I did want to discuss today Le Grave. It's one of my favourite resorts, if you can call it that. It's not what anyone would call a traditional resort, is it, Sam? Do you want to give us a bit of an insight into perhaps, where it is and what the kind of the format is there?
Yeah, so it's kind of had this mythic status, hasn't it? Whenever I was in Chamonix, all the really good sort of free riders would talk about Le Grave, and it's like the hardest kind of version of Grand Montet you can possibly imagine. So it always sort of piqued my interest. But then I heard stories about, people kind of falling off cliffs. And so I've always been a bit scared to go there, but then excited at the thought of going there. So finally managed to kind of work it into a story for The Guardian last year. Tied into the fact that actually, as we were just discussing, developments, whether lift developments should happen, tied into the climate crisis and what the industry is going to look like in a few years' time. There's a debate going on about that in Le Grave, but purely on the kind of experience basis, yeah. So
to put it into context then, Le Grave is in the southern French Alps. Typically you'd probably go to Grenoble and go along the valley, go past Alpe d'Huez, go past Les Deux Alpes, and you'll come to Le Grave before, if you went over Col de Lotteret to Serre Chevalier. And I said before, it's not really a traditional resort because there's not much après going on, is there? And there's only one lift out of town.
Yeah, so no piste markers, no piste bashers. It really is unlike anything you've kind of experienced, except actually Silverton in Colorado that I had been to. And I suppose Grand Montet, if you kind of make your own way down. And just to look at this face when you kind of arrive in town, it's so dramatic, it's so gorgeous looking, kind of jagged peaks, the Meger Glacier, kind of hanging over the town. So yeah, I was really, really excited to be there. The lifts, these kind of Pantone coloured orange and yellows, they look really retro. So you feel like you're stepping back in town. And same goes for the kind of little village. You know, it's really quite unlike the kind of super developed resorts that we're used to now. I think there was a boulangerie, a fromagerie. I don't think I saw any chain stores. I stayed in this amazing place called Gîte La Rocher that had kind of vintage snowboards up on the wall, had kind of posters of like 80s metal bands. And NoJO Olympics signs everywhere. I felt really rebellious and old school. It was actually how I remembered Chamonix when I did my season. So I kind of really related that. Lots of kind of scruffy snowboarders and free riders that were clearly kind of amazing at their sport, hanging around, and no kind of, no like pretension, just a kind of pure love of the mountains and wild rawness, which I loved.
I've been there a few times, 3 times, I think. I stayed in the Skiers Lodge. I don't know if that's still there. Yeah. One of the classic places up on the other side, looking out over that mountain that you're talking about. But every single time I've been there, I say it's different from other places. I mean, I've always been with a guide. I don't know if people ski there without guides, but it's pretty essential, right?
Yeah, so I'm pretty risk averse anyway. So I'd spoken to a few people. There's a journalist I know, Vanessa Boucher, who was really helpful, French journalist who lives there. She's married to a Spanish guide, and she had said, don't even think about coming without a guide. And they have a really good collective, the Bureau de Guide La Grave, who kind of will give you really good advice, and they actually have quite reasonable packages, especially if you've never been to La Grave before, for €106, including your lift pass. You can have a day, which is actually super reasonable if you think about what guiding prices can take. So I definitely recommend that.
You have been on the podcast before talking about snowboards. Were you snowboarding in La Grave or were you skiing?
Yeah, so I was snowboarding. I actually can't ski. I was splitboarding. So we did actually do a bit of hiking. The button lift, because the glacier is receding at the top, you can't quite get as high as you would want to. So we actually splitboarded the last section to get a longer run. But yeah, a lot of people had said, in fact, I think you might have said to me, Ian, you're going on a snowboard. That's interesting. So that had sort of added to my kind of concerns about it a bit. But actually, it was completely fine. Like, I mean, I am quite controlled and used to doing steep stuff. And my guide actually, with his wisdom, said that we wouldn't do the lower run because they'd actually had some rain lower down that had then refrozen. So actually, we got the lift down the final bit, and I was very happy to do that.
There is a reason that La Grave has this reputation. Evidently there's some really good steep skiing there, but there's several sections in La Grave which are specifically no fall zones. And unfortunately, I think probably, every year there are fatalities there. Certainly there've been some relatively famous fatalities there. In fact, this is awful, but I think the last time I went there, the guide who took us, died later on that season. But regular listeners may have listened to the episodes that I've recorded with Peter Hardy and Arnie Wilson. And Arnie Wilson skied the world every day for a year with his partner at the time. And they went to La Grave after they completed that, joined by another journalist, Peter Hardy, as well. Neither of them really wanted to speak about this on the podcast, and I think you can probably read the book to find out more about it. But unfortunately, Arnie Wilson's partner died then. That was the conclusion to their story. It certainly has. There's a reason you take a guide with you and you don't just free ski it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say my guide was really clear early on that I didn't want to do anything sketchy. And he was complete, like he said, well, it wouldn't have occurred to me to take you above those kind of no fall zone couloirs with the condition as it is. So I think it needs sensible guides and it needs sensible clients, but equally, as we know in the mountains, you can't always account for that stuff, particularly when there's fresh snow. So I think it is definitely a place to be respected. I didn't meet anyone that seemed kamikaze when I was there, but
to be honest with you, one time I went there with my brother and, the snow wasn't particularly good. And we didn't even ski in La Grave. Our guide actually took us. We kind of drove 10 minutes around the corner on the opposite side of the mountain and just went touring and skied over there. And it was still fantastic to be in an area completely away from any lifts and to be sharing the mountain. But, La Grave does have this reputation, and you've already mentioned it, the top lift there. I specifically wanted to address the proposal to replace that top lift. What would you see, or what are people saying is the issue within La Grave?
Yeah, so the top button lift needs replacing anyway because the glacier's receded. So that's kind of not fit for purpose. And I think there's universal agreement about that. And then it feels to me like the town is divided, and that includes the guides. You get some guides pro, some guides against, some guides are down the middle about whether that lift gets replaced at all, whether they just leave it for touring at the top, or what the resort company, which is Aon, which is owned, the same ones that own Outdoors and Lides Alpes, they want to put a cable car there to make the glacier, like to make it more accessible to pedestrians, summer tourists, and also, people that perhaps might not want to ski there. And also at the moment, you have to walk about 40 minutes if you want to kind of do that final stretch at the top. And so I think they want to improve its accessibility. And what's so interesting is it's at the heart of the debate that, ski resorts, as Nick will know, all over the world are kind of having is, as the snow sort of rain line gets higher and higher, how much do we want to build? Do we want to preserve these pristine environments and keep them as pure as they kind of can be? Or do we want as many people as possible to ski and to build higher up? It's an interesting debate.
It certainly is a debate. I mean, so you mentioned Aon, and regular listeners will know that I interviewed them about the new Jandri lift they're building in Lides Alpes. I did find out a little bit more about this. Their view would be that the existing button is diesel, therefore it's more polluting. They want to replace it with an electric lift, which will have zero emissions because they use renewable electricity. It will increase the number of people, being able to access the top there. And I wonder if this crosses over with something that often crops up, like in surfing, whether there's a degree of localism to it. People who are there just want to keep that to themselves.
I don't think there is. I mean, I think undeniably the less people that are up there, the fewer tracks you'll kind of get, but I definitely didn't get that vibe. I think there's an element that people are worried about last chance tourism, aren't they? You see this in Chamonix. There was a really good piece in the New York Times about that, and people going to see these glaciers before they disappear. And I think there is a danger in places being marketed in that way. I suppose, how do you decide who is doing that? Is the ski tourer okay, but the person in their kind of, I don't know, what Ugg boots are not okay? It's a really interesting debate. And there's a price kind of discussion to it as well, purity of experience. I can see lots of sides to it.
Well, I mentioned I'm going to lay this out. What I'm hoping to do, since you brought this up and since I noticed it in your article, is to try and get an interview with them specifically about this new lift, and to try and address some of those topics. And will be interesting to see what they have to say. So if that goes well, that will go into one of the episodes in kind of mid-July or something like that. That's brilliant, Sam. I take it you enjoyed your trip there to Le Grave, right?
Had a great trip. We actually did touring one day, like you said as well, kind of up the valley, and did some splitboard touring. And so I felt it was a great destination, even if you're not amazing or extreme or want to be. There's a much more mellow slope with ski lifts that we went to, and actually, we went touring, and the town just a bit more lo-fi. I got the train there. Generally really liked the people. So would heartily recommend Le Grave. People looking for an alternative kind of ski holiday.
Well, that's really great, Sam. Thank you for sharing that with us. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move us to the close. I enjoy all feedback about the show. I like to know what you think, listener, especially about our features. So please do contact me on social at Ski Podcast or by email, theskipodcast@gmail.com. I've had a few bits of feedback since the last episode. James Rice contacted us about episode 204, another great episode. He also said, I'm the anonymous American who left that review on Apple Podcasts. Love the podcast, thanks. Steve Holding said, really love the podcast, especially the equipment episodes and the features on different resorts. And Bob N. Mill on Apple Podcasts gave us a review where he said, excellent podcast covering an incredible range of topics. These special episodes are particularly good, giving fascinating insights into the worlds of the ski industry A-list from a very well-researched and skilled interviewer. Hopefully he means me. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps. Now, if you like the podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. I mentioned it already. Give us a review, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can subscribe. That way you'll never miss an episode. You can see what topics are there and listen to it if you have time. Hopefully you listen to every episode. Or you can buy me a coffee if you like the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/theskipodcast. I don't drink coffee, actually. I only drink tea, but it will be used with gratitude. Now, there are now 219 episodes of the Ski Podcast to catch up with. 96 of those were listened to in the last week. So if you are missing snow through summer, there's so much to listen to on our back catalogue. Just go to theskipodcast.com, search around the tags and categories, and you're bound to find something of interest to you. I also noticed in the stats, 50% of our listeners in the last week were in the UK, 14% in the States, and also 14% in Australia, which makes sense as the season is just starting down there. And I have some good news for our Australian listeners, as our next episode, number 215, is going to feature Rachel Oakes-Ash, widely known to be the expert on the world of skiing and snowboarding down under. Now, that episode will go live around the 5th of July, hopefully posted while I'm travelling out, like Sam did, by train to Grenoble and then on to Ladies Alp. I'll be covering that trip in episode 215 as well. And you can follow me in the meantime at Skipedia and the podcast at the Ski Podcast. But for now, I'd like to thank my guest today. Nick, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day in Utah.
Thanks. It was great to be here. Sam, it was great to hear your stories, and I look forward to seeing more.
Cool. And Sam, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Great to meet you, Nick. And yeah, thanks for having me again, Iain. Take care.
And finally, listener, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you're listening right now. And until next time, goodbye.